Ready to go?
Sorry.
Hello, good morning everyone. How are we doing? Is everyone well caffeinated? Had your pain au chocolat, your croissants? Excellent. Well, thank you for joining us. We've got a really action-packed hour. So, as a quick introduction, my name's Tom Tapper. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Nice and Serious, a creative agency that's dedicated to making creative work the world needs. I'm a very proud B Corp, and I'm also an advisor for Creatives for the Climate. So there is a reason why this summit isn't called Change Tomorrow or Change at some distant point in the future, because it's called Change now because of the end of the era of vague promises is over. And today, regulators, investors, citizens don't want promises, they want proof. And that is exactly what this session is about. So over the next hour, we're going to be moving beyond the what and the why of sustainability and focusing on the how. We'll hear from the architects of global scientific benchmarks, the pioneering businesses who are proving that transparency isn't just a tick box burden, but a real competitive advantage. Now, we've had a little bit of a change in order, so the script has gone slightly offbeat, but actually we're going to start with the panel discussion from two really fascinating guests from different businesses around the world. We're going to be heading into the engine room, or perhaps I should say the battery pack of sustainability, and speaking to two people who are perfectly positioned to discuss the role business has to play in getting us to the sustainable future, I should say, that we want to achieve. So joining me on stage, we have Frederica Claren, who is the head of sustainability at Polestar, the electric vehicle brand, and Gauthier Acket, who is head of global ESG at KPMG International. So please give them a very warm welcome onto stage, and we'll have a conversation for half an hour. So Gauthier and Frederica. Please grab a seat. So Gauthier, I need to first ask, is it always this beautiful in Paris?
It is. Welcome to Paris. This is what it's like usually.
And thank you both as well for joining us. So let's kick things off. So Gauthier, you're in quite a unique role as head of global ESG at KPMG. So I know very well you've just been traveling, you're working with clients all over the world, and there's a lot of noise around ESG at the moment, a lot of talk of backtracking, political debate fatigue. But based on the conversations you're having in boardrooms, what's the broad direction of travel?
Look, Tom, you refer to the noise in ESG, and we all know that it is indeed the case. The political pressure, economic pressure, are creating a lot of challenges for this ESG agenda. As you said, I just came back from 2 weeks in Asia, and I can tell you that the discussions there are actually a lot about how do we take advantage of this energy transition. They're going to be leading in that space. And the discussions are actually more about what can we do to lead, to win in a net zero world, than just how to adapt to the net zero world. So that's quite fascinating. So what I think is there will be different trends depending on regions, depending on sectors actually, but three things will remain in my view, and those three things will drive actions. The first one, scarcity of energy resources. Scarcity of resources in general. And I think that what is really important to notice there is that we all know that we want cheap, secured, and green energy. And at the same time, we've got this boom in AI that's going to generate a need for power demand that's going to be double of what we need right now in 4 years' time. The second trend is the business impact of the disruptions, the natural disasters disruptions. We all know that sustainability discussions are more about resilience than anything else right now. And then, a number of companies have been impacted in their supply chains by these natural disasters.
Yeah.
And we all remember, was it like a year or two ago, when one of the car manufacturer, and obviously not Polestar, Frederica, was impacted by big floods.
Yeah. Yeah.
So the third,
Here in Europe
trend
as
that
well.
I think, huh?
Here in Europe as well.
Exactly,
Yeah.
here in Europe, in Switzerland. The third theme for me is because of the second point, the natural disasters, governments will be forced to act. And what you're going to see is more regulation, and compliance will be made even more difficult, more complex. And so, today ISSB is impacting 40 jurisdictions around the world. That's 37% or 57% of GDP. It's 40% of the global market capitalization. So we know that it's coming. So my point here is sustainability is here to stay. No matter what we hear in terms of political debate, in terms of political noise, it is a strategic imperative. And that is, really a topic that will continue to be discussed at length.
Well, that's a nice bit of positivity to kick off the day. I'm already feeling lightened by the sun. Now, I'm assuming, has everyone heard of Polestar? Yeah, they're a very cool car brand. They're one that I actually would love to own one day. So Frederica, thank you for joining us. So you're the head of sustainability at Polestar, and I read on your website that you claim to be the world's most transparent car company. Now that is...
We aim to be.
Sorry, aim to
not
be. Sorry, aim,
claim
claim.
to be.
Important notice
very
from the PR
important,
team.
the
Thank you.
distinction there.
So that is it's a very big promise that even has an aim. So how do you actually prove that to customers? How do you show up and live that?
And maybe also why would we want to set that ambition for ourselves? So yes, so I'm from Polestar, and if there's one thing that I want you to understand, coming from the inside of the automotive industry, that is that change is happening, regardless of what the EU politicians are trying to, bring into the debate, or other forces are trying to make consumers believe. Fundamental change is happening, and it's happening very quickly. So we, of course, are very excited to be a part of this time, providing a clear climate solution, almost a silver bullet, to decarbonize the automotive industry, the electric car. And in 5 years, we've been able to put 3 car models on the market, Polestar 2, 3, and 4, at an amazing pace, and our 4th one is coming soon. So we know that this is happening. We know that we are catering to the 89% of the global population who wants change on climate and wants action on climate. And we're seeing, an amazing uptake. In the EU, right now, more electrified cars are sold than fossil cars. So we're at the inflection point, and after here, it's going to accelerate. But we need to protect this trend, right? And when we started out as a young company, we just felt that we wanted to go about communication and building our brand in a new way. We wanted to just go beyond the question of greenwashing, greenhushing, and define a more honest and transparent and accountable way of talking about sustainability. And we've been doing that ever since. And I guess the measure that we look at is, are we most transparent all of the time? We challenge ourselves as a team to really push the envelope on transparency for the automotive industry by, always with every year's sustainability report or the launch of a car model, like what can we more give in terms of insights here? Because what we're trying to do is solve the challenge we all have, that consumers want this change, but they don't trust us in doing that. They don't trust business. And they also want more sustainable solutions, but they don't feel that we are providing that to them. So that's why transparency and communication in a different way is essential going forward.
Thank you, Frederica. So I guess, Gauthier, if you look, Frederica's kind of speaking about trust more at that consumer level, I suppose, just like building that rapport with the customer. But I suppose from your experience, when you're in boardrooms around the world, do you find CFOs, so chief financial officers, do you find they are demanding that similar level of trust about the ESG data that they're getting? Are you seeing that on a daily
Well, look,
basis?
Tom, you're absolutely right. We're increasingly seeing that, the CFOs and others actually asking for the same level of trust in their non-financial data as in their financial data.
Yep.
I mean, as you know, I work for KPMG. KPMG, provides services to, audit, tax, and legal and advisory services to quite a large number of companies. What we did, recently was we looked at all the audit mandates that we won in the last 2 years. That's quite a few. And we looked at whether sustainability or ESG assurance was a big component of this. And it was in 72% of the cases. So basically, 3 out of 4 of these mandates, required significant assurance around their non-financial data. So what does that mean? It means that, the level of trust in that information will increase. And what you see is also that we're moving from limited assurance to reasonable assurance, which is a technical term, but it shows again the level of trust will increase. And a good example of that is in Australia. Australia just introduced, as I mentioned earlier, ISSB, so that's called ASSB in Australia.
Yep.
And they'll move from limited to reasonable assurance in the coming years. And same thing about Australia. We talk all about the US and what they're doing, but actually, if you think about SB 256, which will impact companies based in California, and sorry to be technical, but the point here is, again, it's going to require assurance. So I think we need to remember that we're on a journey here. We're on a journey. CSRD was just implemented last year. And when you look at the analysis we conducted on the first surveys, right, on the first reports that were issued, you know the length of these reports, how much they are?
Yeah.
On an average, 125 page long. So who finds the time to read that in detail? Maybe AI. But the point here is, we on a journey, we're going to progress for sure, and there were like some data issues, but as I said, we need to put things in perspective and look at the big schemes of things. If you allow me to take you back 532 years ago.
Please do.
You know what happened then? We're in 1494. Okay, 1494. There's a guy called Luca Pacioli. He invented double entry bookkeeping. It doesn't mean anything to you, Tom, but it means a lot to our friends that are accountants,
Yeah.
because that's the foundation of accounting. It's it's basically took us 500 years to continue to refine it and embed it. Same thing with another regulation called SOX. SOX was implemented, Sarbanes-Oxley law was implemented 20 years ago, and in 2022, you still had companies that had 9 control deficiencies on average. So all of this to say that it takes time,
Yeah.
but we know the direction of travel. And the direction of travel is not to treat just compliance as a simple exercise. It's to build a trust in the data that is provided to make sure that you take the right decisions with it.
Sure. Love that. And I also love a little history lesson. I'm a sucker for a history podcast. So thank you for sharing that. So Federico, I'm guessing this CSRD, day to day must put quite a big reporting burden on an organization like yours or such as yours. But beyond ticking boxes, can you give us all a sense of how being radically transparent, and I would class you as a business as radically transparent, how is that actually leading to innovations in your business, in your supply chains? Because you've got some really fascinating examples of this. So can you kind of share that with all of us?
Yeah, so as a Swedish person having worked with sustainability for many years, I find the whole CSRD awakening quite amusing in many ways. Because in Sweden, we've had a regulation in the Annual Accounts Act law that you need to report on sustainability since way back. So as a sustainability professional in Sweden, we've been doing sustainability reports for a long time. And, what I see is that it really boils down to the fact that Sweden is a highly innovative country. We're ranked, top innovating countries all of the time. And we also have a lot of companies who have truly gone into green tech, want to market more sustainable solutions. And if you do that, you realize that, I'm going to have to really translate this to investors, to banks. I'm going to have to show them how this creates value. So that for me is sustainability reporting, and it's not. I don't see it as a compliance burden. I see it as a way for me to prove to stakeholders that what we are doing is working. I mean, we see, coming back to your real question, sorry about that, the kind of the values that we see from implementing all of the, sustainability measures that we're doing, there's so many values that you want to capture, right, when it comes to sustainability. Everything from brand love and attention and awareness to new revenue streams, or being resilient in a changing dynamic world, enhancing your products through sustainable design and technology. And that means that you actually, to capture all of that, you need to secure that you focus on what matters. So for us, traceability has been a key point in that enables us to not only de-risk and secure that our supply chains, these global blood veins that runs across the globe, can really adapt and be resilient, but also that we in the end can prove to our consumers that we've actually managed to deliver the solution to them that they ask for us. So for example, we have traceability on 4 risk minerals now in our batteries: cobalt, mica, lithium, and nickel. Polestar 2 was the first car on the market that had cobalt, where we use blockchain traceability to trace it down to the mine.
Which is incredibly hard to trace, isn't it? From my understanding,
I mean, blockchain makes it efficient, simple. What we, of course, need to do, what the hard thing is, securing that suppliers want to do it, want to be a part of that type of transparency. But the technicalities of it is not that hard. I was just listening to the opening statement, and one thing that I really took away from that was that he said that, the challenge is not around technology, it's about philosophy and our shared values. So again, we're seeing that the technologies to really solve the sustainability challenges are here now. It's just the shared philosophy we have around this and the ability to shift mindsets that is the challenge.
Is the key. Thanks for sharing that. So, Gauthier, as we've heard, the sort of CSRD and the imperative for large businesses to really prove their impact is generating a huge amount of data right now. So give me a sense of what questions should business actually be asking themselves around the data, because so often data becomes almost an end in itself and people are forgetting to ask those key questions. So from your perspective, what questions should businesses be asking themselves?
Well, look, Tom, you're right. Gathering the data is a challenge in itself. We talked about that. Gathering reliable data is also a challenge. But what we need to keep in mind is not the data itself, it's what we do with it. There's a huge amount of insight that you can derive from your data and the data that your competitors, I would argue, are gathering. For instance, why is your competitor having lower Scope 3 emissions? Is that a proxy for better efficiency, better cost management? So what is it for, right? And so I think we need to keep in mind that sustainability can actually drive a lot of the performance. And so what we did at KPMG, we've got this methodology which we call value driver trees. So imagine a tree with different branches. Each branch represents how you can basically increase profits or influence profits in an organization. So, simple things like pricing can imply, or cost of reduction. So what we did with actually one of my clients is we looked at the impact of the increase in temperature, the increase also in the price of copper on the electronic parts that are incorporated in their core products. Right. And what they decided to look at is how they could use circularity as a different approach to drive a growth. So again, for me, what is it that you do with the data? It all starts with the data. Another example is in India, we were helping a client in the consumer and retail sector. We helped them reduce their emission by 8%. It had a direct impact on their EBITDA, which increased by 10%.
Really?
Because of better packaging, because of looking at the impact of transport and logistics. So all of that to say that everything starts with the data, but what you do with it is more important than just gathering it.
Yeah, I mean, it's a lot easier case to make if you're increasing profit by 10%.
Exactly, and actually that company was being sold anyway, so it did have a big impact on the sale as well.
Fantastic. Now, this is the only panel I've been on where I've needed sunglasses.
As a Scandinavian, I'm so enjoying this. I want to
used to that in Sweden,
I want
right?
to sit here.
Yeah, it's like we're kind of on a beach, on a stage. It's but no, thank you for sharing that. It's great to have the actual sort of numbers behind it. So, Federico, I suppose, and maybe sometimes in sustainability we're a little bit scared of talking about sort of competitive advantage because often people are motivated by the altruistic goals. But I guess a lot of car manufacturers that I know highlight or really focus on the zero tailpipe emissions aspect of it because ultimately they are, in many respects, a climate solution. Whereas you stick a big carbon footprint on your cars, which you I think call the cradle to gate figure, which from my perspective as a marketeer seems quite counterintuitive to highlight the negative impact. So why do you do this? And does it in any way work?
Well, it's twofold. It is one to really solve what I just spoke about, the trust issue that we're seeing from consumers, them being really jaded and skeptical towards any type of marketing from companies. So we wanted to really secure that we tell them that an electric car can really enable you to cut your own climate emissions and really be a part of the transition that we're going through. But it comes with a climate footprint. It comes with a carbon debt. And we're going to do everything that we can to keep cutting that. So for a long time, we've been publishing life cycle assessments for all of our cars and all of the variants of the cars as well. So if you're going into our website, you're interested in a Polestar 3 maybe, you can also see that there are different variants of that car where you have, for example, long range or standard range, or you have dual motor or single motor, and that actually means a difference in roughly 1 ton of CO2 on the car. So you can feel that you are really making decisions based on this important data and then feel empowered in that, hopefully. So yeah, we are, when we did this, we of course were very mindful in how we went about communicating this, and we were a bit worried of how it would come across. But you have to remember that we are, I don't know if you know this, but Polestar is essentially a racing team. We were founded as a racing car company in Sweden. We approach sustainability from a no-fuss engineering perspective more than anything. So I think that we are quite pragmatic and bold in our choices, and it's paid off. Consumers are really telling us that they trust us. They really find this information to be, supporting them. We've never gotten a bad comment about it.
And is that showing up in the conversations in showrooms with the dealerships and how they interact with customers? People are asking questions about carbon or?
Well, they're not asking questions. I keep telling this to my team and to the amazing colleagues that we have out in the market. We have to bring this up because they care about sustainability, but they don't know what to ask or how to ask it when they're in a store. We have to bring it up, and if we bring it up, they will connect with it. That's what I'm seeing all of the time. It creates this kind of curiosity and engagement. And of course, what we're trying to do is that when you see the car, we can point to tangible solutions that they can touch and feel, like more innovative circular upholstery material. We have sustainability labels printed on the on the upholstery in the car, so that you can see that the different types of materials that we supply you with come with different carbon footprints, the recycled content, if it's traced, and so on. So I think that's really important for companies to be aware of, that they're not just automatically going to ask you these questions. You have to package it and deliver it in a proactive way.
Wonderful. Thank you for sharing that. So, Gauthier, let's sort of look ahead. So, I kind of get the impression that a lot of climate transition plans, or at least the conversations I have about them, are focused more on whether a business can survive in this changing world, this changing future that we're all going to live in. But do you think that idea of just looking at it purely as survival of an old business model, do you think that mindset is a sort of missed opportunity in some respects?
Well, I'll tell you what, Tom. I think that those businesses that take the transition plans as a box-ticking exercise, I think they're missing the wider point. Basically developing your transition plan is giving you a massive opportunity to just plan your future in a low-carbon environment. And that means that, it's not just about surviving, it's about thriving. Like I said about, what's happening in Asia. Because I think that there will be a Kodak example to the energy transition. We all remember that, some companies didn't adapt to the technology wave. So I think, we have a big opportunity to just, adapt to that in a world, as I said, thrive in it. But it requires a lot of effort. It requires, companies to take the entire stakeholders with them, the entire organizations with them, and convince, people. We were just talking about that with Federica just backstage. But I think we need our sustainability experts to also believe in it. And on this stage last year, exactly on that stage, there was a mining company that was talking about how the lowest cost product that they produce was coming from a recycling, and circularity process. So I think we've got multiple examples of how sustainability can be less about compliance, more about competitiveness, more about resilience. And we need all of that for the future of the world, as you mentioned, Tom.
Yeah, love that. Love that message of hope. Thank you for sharing that, Gauthier. So I guess, Frederica, just to try to bring things to a wrap. So your business arguably provides a climate solution, even though there are obviously still challenges in that manufacturing process. But you've been very open and honest about the journey you're on, the challenges you still face. On a day-to-day basis, working in a large business, what gives you hope that you can actually hit that aim that you've promised your customers? What gives you hope?
So much. I really want to convey this, that it's happening, it's changing, and we're seeing, evidence of this all of the time. Again, we have the technologies, we have the engineers that we need. I get to work with amazing engineers. I mean, the automotive industry has such power in terms of research and development and innovation. You wouldn't believe it. I used to work in fashion before, and of course, that's also a highly innovative industry. But automakers are really dedicating a lot of resources into solving different technical challenges. Unfortunately, they still keep putting money into legacy technology, like making the ICE technology more efficient than whatever it is, while we put all of our research and development funds into climate. How can we make our cars work in a climate neutral society? And that's what we're really engaged in. And here we have an amazing project called the Postal Zero Project. We've set our net zero target for 2040, like many other companies. But we also, when we did that, we actually started thinking about how will we do it, which is, of course, very important. That I wish that more companies would have done properly. And what we understood was that, okay, we're going to have to solve how to create one climate neutral car and then scale that to secure that all of our cars in 2040 are completely climate neutral in terms of the production related emissions and also the use phase emissions. And that project is now being worked at from an engineering perspective. We have an amazing team of engineers. And it's also housed in a collaborative hub called the Mission Zero House, a physical hub in Gothenburg, where our engineers do research and innovation projects together with industry stakeholders. And one very hopeful, tangible thing that has come out of this type of research is a low carbon, close to net zero steel. Amazing. That the Swedish steelmaker SSAB has created, and that you can actually buy from the market today. And this just shows us that it's an engineering problem. It can be done. We have the ability to do this. We have to be mindful of where we put our attention and where we spend our money as companies.
And if you haven't heard about that case study, do research it. What the manufacturer is it? SSAB?
SSAB.
Your partnership there was really interesting. So do look that up.
There's a film on YouTube that you can watch.
A lot of hope, right? A lot of hopes and a lot of heroes of change here in the room. So that's really great too, right? Thanks for sharing that.
And I've got a minute and a half left, so I'm going to ask a very quick question, and it's a big one, but let's see if we can get through it. So I know you've been traveling around the world at the moment, Gauthier. We're a world at war. That's exposing a lot of vulnerabilities which people hadn't quite realized. With the conversations you're having, are you also seeing the sustainability opportunity, the resilience that comes from that when businesses take their supply chains, take that more seriously? Are you?
Well, look, I wasn't traveling all around the world, right? I just did, a trip to Asia. But I agree. I mean, what's very interesting is a lot of journalists, they were asking me that exact same question, saying, "Oh, wow, what does the war do?" And I think to stay, I mean, it's a disaster, right? What's happening. But if we're trying to be a little bit more positive, it's going to be a catalyst for change, for sure. And it's going to be because, as I said, sustainability is about resilience. And that's what, people are talking about. So hopefully, that's going to drive a lot of change in terms of energy transition in particular.
Fantastic, thank you. And Frederica, last one. You're having some really interesting conversations with your customers at the moment for MPS. Just give us a sense of the sort of conversations you're having, and does that give you hope?
Absolutely. I mean, what we're seeing in our consumer dialogue is that, if the ones that really see how we are, delivering something that is well designed, with, a highly functioning and performing technology, but also in a sustainable way, they are very satisfied as customers. We're seeing this in our studies, and it, those people who respond that they see those three strengths, they are also more likely to promote us. So, I mean, I keep thinking that in this noisy world that we are in now, we have to put our ears to the ground and listen to the many, many people who want change. We're going to have to really be mindful of not being a part of spreading the misinformation and the false, and not even giving that too much space. Yep. And defy it, really, not be complicit. In the EU right now, they're cutting the word climate neutrality out of the laws and the regulations being approved in the EU Parliament. It's a fight that we have to put up, and I think that if we listen to the everyday people, we will feel empowered in that.
A message of defiance.
Never give up.
Never give up, I love that. Ladies and gentlemen, please can you give a warm round of applause to our panelists, Gauthier Acket and Frederica Claren. Thank you so much, folks. Thanks for joining. Thank you. Okay, how are we all doing? Right, so next up, I'm delighted to welcome our keynote speaker. He is a very, very interesting character who has spent over 3 decades at the frontier of the climate transition. So this man's career has bridged the highest levels of policy making and boardroom reality. He's been the founding CEO of the UK's Committee on Climate Change. He served as a Director General at several UK government departments and was a former partner at EY, leading net zero strategies for some of the world's largest companies. And now he leads an organization that defines the gold standard for corporate climate action. So please give a very warm welcome to the CEO of the Science Based Targets Initiative, David Kennedy. Thank you, David.
Right. Hello, everybody. Can you hear me okay there at the back? Can you hear? Can we turn it up a little bit? Okay. Can you hear me now? Is that any better? Good. Okay. Well, great to be here. Slightly delayed with problems on the metro, but here I am. So I'm David Kennedy. I'm the CEO of SBTI. Can I check how many people here actually know what the SBTI is? Great. Okay. So my team was saying we're not sure if people will know what the SBTI is. Can we explain it? I will just say we were set up 10 years ago for companies, and 100 companies was our target, 100 companies to set their ambition. They wanted to act on climate change, they wanted to change their business, they wanted to contribute to climate objectives, and they didn't quite know at what level to set ambition and where to focus. And we have helped them with that, but we've gone well beyond the 100, I'll tell you that in a minute. We've become, I think, we were introduced as the gold standard is how the SBTI is now known for setting your climate ambition. Now, we've got a lot of negative stories at the moment around net zero, and I'll give you an anecdote. I was in Mumbai flying to Delhi a few weeks ago, seeing some of the big companies over there, so Mahindra and Tata and Bajaj and JSW and various others. And I was introduced on the plane to a big businessman, and when I said what I did, he said, "Oh, nobody's bothered about net zero since Trump, are they?" And I had to say to him, that's not quite correct. Not quite correct. It's not correct at all. And so what I want to do is share some actual evidence around what is happening, rather than those negative stories, which can be quite demoralizing if you really let them take hold of you. But the evidence is as follows. So we just reached a milestone of 10,000 companies have signed up with SBTI. So they've set targets with SBTI, 10,000. That is 40% of global market capitalization. It's 30% of the global greenhouse gas footprint. That hasn't slowed down at all since the change in administration in the United States. And so, for example, in 2024, it was just under 3,000 companies had targets validated by SBTI. Last year, 2025, it was over 3,000, so it's grown. The pace at which companies are joining us has increased at the same time as these negative stories. So companies are voting with their feet. Even in the US, so people say, have US companies left SBTI? And the answer is no, they haven't left SBTI. Do they continue to set targets with SBTI? Yes, they do. 400 US companies last year set targets with SBTI, 100 in December last year. So that continues right through the year. And we would expect about 3,000 companies, based on our pipeline, about 3,000 to set targets with us this year. So companies continue to act. You can see that. Where are these companies? So there's about 5,000 companies in the UK and Europe. There's about 4,000 in, forgotten what I'm saying now. It was an early start for me today. There's about 4,000 in Asia, predominantly Japan, China, and India. And then there's about 1,500 companies who work with us in the United States, about 400 in Latin America as well. So companies all around the world continue to act. Why do they act? It's not because they want to save the world, although many of these companies are values driven, but it has to have a very strong business case. And this business case is about managing transition risk, it's about strengthening business resilience, and it's about remaining competitive, in a changing world with an increasingly tight carbon constraint. So if you do nothing in that world, with carbon prices that are going up, either implicitly through regulations or explicitly through carbon prices in trading schemes or taxes, if you do nothing, your costs will go up. You will make the wrong investment choices. You'll invest in the wrong assets. You'll have to scrap them. You'll have to rapidly deploy new technologies as you get into the 2030s. That is going to be expensive. On the revenue side, increasingly, a lot of the companies that join us are because in their value chains, people will not buy from them further down the value chain. People will not buy for them if they haven't got science-based targets, if they are not acting. at the end of that value chain. So consumers, we know consumers, and particularly younger consumers, are value aligned in their purchasing behavior. That isn't really cutting through to a great extent now, but with better information, we would expect over time, as affordability concerns ease, I say as affordability concerns ease, it's looking pretty bad at the moment, isn't it? But that is a short-term thing. Over the next 5 and 10 years, we would expect that to cut through. And then attracting talent, I can see lots of young people here in the audience. Young people want to work for companies that align with their values. And again, to attract the best talent, you will have to be on that net zero path. So it just makes good business sense. It's managing transition risk, it's strengthening business resilience, and it is remaining competitive in that changing world. Now, setting science-based targets, that's the case for acting to transform your business, your operations, your supply chains. Why would you set science-based targets to do that? As I say, science-based targets is a way of calibrating your ambition, focusing in the right areas, having a common standard with your peers, with your supply chains, with your financial institutions, and there are clear benefits. So we did a survey just before Belém, the CARP in Brazil, and there were some strong themes that came out there. So companies that set science-based targets move more quickly to reduce emissions. They unlock cost savings through things like energy efficiency improvements and renewables. They get much more focus on long-term strategic thinking, which is what you need in this space. They get traction around their businesses, so it's not just a CSO thing, it becomes a strategy, an operations, a procurement game that brings everybody together as it has to do. And it improves your reputation with customers and financial institutions. So many benefits to set science-based targets and then to act, to implement, to start to change your business. And you don't need to change your business overnight. This is a 10 and a 20-year game, but the extent of business transformation, you need to start now, otherwise you will fall behind and leave yourself too much to do. Now, what are we doing at SBTi? What I've heard in my first year, and I've been around about 1 year now as CEO of SBTi, what I've heard is we really need SBTi. We've got to have that common standard, that gold standard. What I also hear is people say, you've got to change. And we are changing. We've just agreed in the last week or so a new strategy with my board, and we will publish that at the end of April. And that is not business as usual for SBTi. It is a step change. And it's a step change in a number of respects, but I'm going to focus in on a couple now because time is short. So the first thing is our approach to standards, and many of you will have seen Corporate Net Zero Standard version 2, which is our flagship. Many of you will have commented, we've engaged widely. We've had 1,000 responses to each of 2 consultations. We've had 100 plus people in expert working groups. We've had 50 companies piloting. We will be publishing, and people are saying, when are you going to publish this Corporate Net Zero Standard? We're going to publish it at the end of June, so we're nearly there. It's with our technical council now for approval. Key changes in that. So one, we are going to have targets which reflect the things that companies can influence and not the things that they can't influence. And that includes an increased focus on dependencies, which we haven't talked about before, but anyone who's done transition planning will know that the dependencies are absolutely key. Second thing is how we define targets. So targets are not set in stone, not binary, and if you miss them, you've failed. The transition is difficult, it's highly uncertain. As I say, it's subject to big dependencies, whether that's technology, supply chain, finance, policy. So targets are set on a best efforts basis. Great if you can meet them, but if you can work towards them, if you can highlight barriers, if you can address those barriers, many of them are beyond the company level, and we will facilitate action beyond the company level with peers and with governments, then you can continue working with SBTi. The third thing is how do you meet those targets? So we've always said it's okay to have renewable electricity certificates, for example, to meet Scope 2 targets, but there is a much wider range of environmental attribute certificates. So biomethane, green steel, green cement, to name a few. Those approaches that you really have to use in certain sectors. So flag, for example, you need mass balance approaches. You need book and claim for those landscape level interventions. They will all be allowed within the new approach. And then we've got a really good balanced position now on high integrity carbon credits, which are a complement, not a substitute to reducing your own carbon footprint, but very much part of our framework. We will recognize the value in that for companies who want to invest in ongoing emissions responsibility, we call it. So that is important, given that we need removals in particular to be anywhere near our climate objectives globally. Second thing is, we are going to focus much more on implementation. What's actually happening? I think it's a gap in our framework at the moment that you set your target and then we see you in 5 years. We're going to have a continuous relationship with companies. We're not going to mark your homework. That isn't our job. Nobody wants us to police what is happening at the individual company level, but we will offer benchmarking services with peers that will be private, that will be anonymized, and we will also offer system-level assessments of what is going well, where are the barriers, and what can be done to address them. And then we will work with partners to make sure the barriers are addressed. We will expand in Asia. That is a big growth market. We will expand in some of the high emitting sectors, so steel we haven't done enough in, aviation, shipping, aluminium, to name a few. We've done quite a lot actually in forestry, land use, agriculture. We've done a lot in cement. We've done a lot in chemicals. We've done a lot in the power sector. But we will grow in those sectors and the ones where we are less well represented at the moment. We will grow as well through supply chains, so we are just at the moment piloting an approach where we work with companies to engage their supply chains and get their suppliers to set science-based targets, and we support them through that journey. And then the last thing is, many of you will have experienced, it's a pretty fragmented ecosystem of organizations that are supporting the corporate net zero transition, from the accounting aspects to the different standards to the assessment of progress to reporting. Now that all has to be joined up, otherwise you are duplicating, you are having to do things to meet one standard and a different standard. That is unnecessary burden, and we see ourselves as coordinating, playing a leading role, making sure that the system is joined up, and making sure that it speaks with one voice. We've got that negative narrative. We haven't got, at the moment, a compelling positive narrative, but we see ourselves working with companies and partners as developing that compelling business resilience narrative, and then telling that story so it starts to resonate and to grow, that it's amplified through the system. I should say as well, people ask me, am I worried about the ISO net zero standard? My answer is no, I'm not worried. I see it as a good thing. There's many tens of thousands of companies out there. It is a great on-ramp, the ISO net zero standard for SBTI. We are working closely with ISO in partnership. So that's an example of how we are joining up. I'm going to leave it there. So I've used my 15 minutes up. I will summarize and say, 1 year in, it's a wonderful organization to lead SBTI at the heart of corporate climate action. I'm so glad I made the move because it brings together all the things I've done previously. Corporate climate action continues. There's a different communications approach, but companies get the argument. There is a strong business case. You should be acting, and if you don't act, your business is not resilient. You're going to fall behind in future. You're setting yourself up to fail. So strong case for action, strong case for setting science-based targets. We are changing. Those targets will be better aligned with the levers you have. They will be pragmatic while remaining science-based. We'll focus more on implementation. We will grow to have even more representation than the 10,000 companies we currently work with. We will work with partners, we'll work with you, and together we can drive the corporate net zero transition. We can make that happen. We've got a great foundation to build on. We can make it happen, and we can do what is good for business and good for the climate. So I will leave it there. Have a great conference here, and I will look forward to seeing you again. Thank you.
Right, folks. Can I just, I work in the creative space. Can I just give a call out to whoever designed this beautiful stage? And only at Change Now would you see such messages of hope and color, and what a wonderful kind of positive note to end on from David there. So Next up, we have our little fireside or more beachside chat, given the sunshine, just to sort of understand why nature is not just a nice to have, but a fundamental business investment. So I'm going to welcome our final guest. Now, she leads SE Advisory Services, nature and technology-based solutions activity. So SE is part of Schneider Electric, where she develops the group portfolio of nature and community projects around the world, closely with project developers, local stakeholders, to deliver effective, high-quality climate solutions aligned with international standards. So please give a warm welcome to our final guest, Mathilde Mignot. Thanks, Mathilde. If you'd like to sit there, please. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Tom. Hi, everybody.
It's a lovely sunny stage, as we've been talking about. so Mathilde, before we kind of jump into the details, I want to take a step back and remind ourselves of why we're here today. So we had a really lovely conversation before this, and for those of you who saw the opening session with Johan Rockstrom, talking about the kind of planetary boundaries and how we've already crossed 7 out of 9 of them. So do you believe that nature-based solutions can actually create the change we need at that planetary scale, on that size of change, I guess?
Thank you for the question, and yes, it's definitely sunny, difficult to see you. Can you hear me well? Yeah, great. So, as you said, and as this is sort of like a topic of this conference change now, the planetary boundaries. We definitely, as updated assessments have shown, have crossed 7 of the 9 planetary boundaries today. So they are transgressed now, and now the question is, let's no longer stay on this reflection. It's more like once we have this, this is the context, how do we act? How do we turn this into action? Our discussion is not to set long-term, medium-term targets, but definitely to provide actionable insight for immediate and transparent actions that will enable corporates to definitely deliver their global targets, basically. Today, my specialty is about nature-based solutions. There are definitely a lot of ways to approach these 9 boundaries and the 2 that are remaining and that are still under severe threat. But when we think about nature-based solutions, and really the beauty about this is that they can address a lot of, not only the CO2 and the climate action, but a lot of the UN Sustainable Development Goals, basically. So we are not only about climate. In a nutshell, nature-based solutions can protect and restore ecosystem. They can support biodiversity. They can improve water and food security, and definitely help with climate mitigation and adaptation. So it's really like a broad approach to climate and biodiversity. Having said that, we need obviously to be able to develop this kind of projects and to be able to replicate them at global level, obviously taking into account current and local context, basically. And going back to your question, Tom, how to scale up. So nature-based solution, once we've said that, they hold promises for planetary scale impact. But being able to replicate, to develop, and to scale up will need to require and to unlock massive private investment. So, as you presented and introduced, the carbon finance is one of those mechanisms. There are a lot of mechanisms, but carbon finance is one of them, especially with the voluntary carbon markets. That is a mechanism that helps to develop different type of projects and address those sustainable development goals with growing interest from investors over the last 6 years, especially into projects such as agroforestry, reforestation, mangrove restoration, a lot of like what we would call those nature solutions that are definitely helping sequestering carbon, which is a big important part as we're talking about the net zero targets, but also like addressing the biodiversity gap. So that's an important point. So having those growing investment is key and essential to be able to move forward, to scale up, and to reach those targets. One important point to note there, though, is like it's not only about scaling up; it's about doing it the right way. Meaning like the right project, finding the right partners, and going and sometimes being in the in environments that are like complicated and making sure that we again adapt to current context. So it's about scaling up, but then doing it properly, and what we say is like doing it with high integrity.
Yeah, love that. And so I feel like a lot of the climate conversation today is centered around how companies can kind of clean up their own value chains, just like directly linked to them. But I think you've spoken to me about the imperative to companies to go beyond their value chain, to think more broader. So can you just explain why is it the case?
Now that's a good question, because climate is sometimes not on the top agenda of all corporates, and it's how to convince them that climate is not only an imperative in terms of like it's a climate imperative, but it's a business need, basically, as most of our businesses and companies relies on natural resources to actually like conduct their activities. Yep. So the real question is not only, and I was mentioning this before, the scale, but also the speed. Being able to clean up a company's own value chain is necessary, but is not sufficient to deliver the global targets, the global net zero target at the speed and the scale that is required. 2050 is like in less than 25 years. So basically, we've mentioned about the scale, but how to make this speed. And we had the CEO of SBTi, David, just before mentioning about ongoing emission responsibility. This is all about this. How to make sure that we connect, like we act within our value chain, but we're not only about thinking about cleaning our own footprint. We think more globally, we contribute more globally. And it is also important, actually very important, to note that even the very ambitious company, and I will say I'm part of a very ambitious company, and Schneider Electric has been, I think, almost like 3 times or 2 times in a row nominated by Time Magazine as like the most sustainable corporate. So we are in a very ambitious environment, but there will still, and we will still have residual emission for years. So especially, like I'm mentioning the Schneider, but a lot of like other sectors such as hard-to-abate activities, or when we think about supply chain, how to make sure that we channel corporate fundings to credible mitigation projects that can unlock emission cuts and removals that will otherwise happen too slowly. So we don't have time to only think about our own value chain, basically. Yep. And to finish on this, going beyond value chain can also strengthen other aspects, such as what I said, resilience, but also reputation and readiness to regulation. Because things are also moving on at different levels, and it's helping companies to really showing that they contribute to a broader societal climate goals and not, as I said many times, not managing their own footprints. So a good climate strategy, obviously, will be to start with a deep internal decarbonization and then add, but when I say then, it's like almost like simultaneously. Yep. Yeah. Sorry for my French accent, I'm trying to, to say it right, to address the remaining emission to support this wider transition. Yep.
Understood. That was really clear. So I guess this session is all around proof, not promises. That's why we're here. And I know some businesses might see nature as more of a nice to have. It's the impression I sometimes get. So I know you believe there is a real hard business case for it. And when you are working with your executive teams, when you're consulting, how do you sort of explain the difference between, I guess, just buying a carbon credit and actually protecting the natural world that their business depends on? Do you think that difference is understood? And how do you make that point?
So first, the nice to have is no longer acceptable. And I think we all agree on this, and we won't be a change now if it was still a nice to have. Today, the business risk, and again, going back to the risk and the business resilience that was also mentioned by SBTi just before, is huge. Nature degradation threatens 44 trillion of the global GDP. Oh. So basically through, and we see it on the daily news, through supply chain disruption due to oil degradation, water stress, biodiversity loss, like you name it. But at this stage, extreme weather and ecosystem degradation are causing hundreds of billions of loss for companies. So it's not a nice to have. If we take an easy example, a simple example, last year in 2025, a single summer of extreme heat, of drought, of flooding throughout Europe caused at least 43 billion in short-term, very short-term economic losses, affecting obviously farmers, winemakers, tourism industry. So is just one easy example to show how climate-related shock are hitting revenues and marching across different type of sectors. So here is like, once we've said that, is not a nice to have, but how to ensure that, yes, buying carbon credits, what does it mean? The key here is to invest in high integrity carbon project, which means enabling a holistic approach, leveraging carbon credits, meaning like the CO2 as a mechanism to invest, and the CO2 approach, I will say, to address multiple challenges while delivering biodiversity and water uplift, community benefits, obviously, and ultimately turning nature into an asset rather than a liability for corporates. So talking to executive teams, as you were asking me, who would see, unfortunately, nature as soft, it will be important to highlight these different points and maybe summarizing them with a few easy things that are clear for them to understand. Supply chain security, obviously, fewer disruption, more stable inputs, but also like regulatory and disclosure risk. Obviously, a lot of discussion about, let's say, CBAM style type of rules, so the carbon border adjustment mechanism, for example, CSRD, as TNFD. All of these are definitely risk also not to address. And in the end, it's also about investor and consumer expectations. It sounds soft, but it's important today to ensure that the cost of capital, but also the brand loyalty are being taken into account by executive team for a sustainable business. So it is definitely crucial for companies today, and I mean like the most advanced one already recognize this, to understand that nature is a cornerstone of a well-defined, business-aligned climate strategy.
Yeah, love that. Thank you. And so I guess I feel like we can't talk about nature and nature-based solutions without talking about the voluntary carbon market, for those of you who know about it. And that has had, in the past, I think it's fair to say, its fair share of kind of transparency issues. Now, you are chair of ICWA, have I said that correct? ICWA?
Right.
Near enough. And which is about promoting best practices in the voluntary carbon market. So do you feel that we're finally getting to a place where a company can prove that their investment in nature is actually having a real impact?
Yeah, so the voluntary carbon market has been like existing for more than 20 years now, and we've been like very involved through, as you say, ICRA and other like instances to try to deliver like best quality type of projects. But it has definitely not been always easy. And we can see that it has been maturing, and it has been strongly supported by integrity standards that allows companies to credibly demonstrate real impact from nature-based solution. And lately, I would say like over the last 6 to 5 years, we've been like seeing frameworks such as the Integrity Council for Voluntary Carbon Market, so the ICVCM, and their core carbon principle that have set rigorous benchmark for high quality standards, and including those generated by nature-based type of project, basically. It has been key, definitely having those type of framework has been key in the recent years to advance type of methodology to improve the way we monitor project, to improve transparency. So a lot of things have been done to really improve. Definitely access, and we talk about AI on a daily basis, but access to more advanced digital tools have also improved the ability to assess projects. So I'm talking about obviously nature-based solution project, but all type of projects, and to enhance traceability of impact in terms of ecosystem restoration and preservation. So that's one thing. Framework have been improved. But one other thing that I have been interested in that has mainly happened over the last, I would say, 18 months, is the support of governments. Governments have played an essential role in highlighting carbon finance mechanism as a critical tool to meet the Paris Agreement goals. And, and obviously to encourage contribution from the private sector. In this same Grand Palais a year ago, the former French Ministry for Green Transition has launched a coalition named Coalition for High Integrity Carbon Credits. So it's been up to the ministry saying we need high integrity carbon credits. And on a broader scale, if we don't think only about France, but on a broader scale, the Coalition to Grow Carbon Markets brings together, so basically not only the French government, but also several other governments, such as the UK. I know, Tom, you come from the UK, so mentioning, but also Kenya, Singapore, and different other countries to support investment in high-integrity projects. So this support from the government saying it's the right mechanism, after all of these, I would say, like time of troubles and criticism of it's not perfect, you need to do better, is really helpful and essential. So I would say that today, we can say that the conditions are in place. There are still a lot of work to be done. Obviously, when we talk about the ICVCM, they have not yet finalized of approving all of the methodologies of going through. They represent a small part of the carbon credits available on the market, but it's being done, basically. Yeah. So it's a work in progress. The supply must scale to meet the demand, for sure, but progress is moving in the right direction. So we are in the right place, and it's precisely now time to act. There's no longer time to say we still need to expect the perfect tool, the perfect framework. So basically the trend is encouraging, and as of early 2026, we are seeing a shift toward more selective demand from corporates, more focused on quality. So we really welcome this.
So we've only got 30 seconds left. So I guess if you could leave people with one message in terms of encouraging them to invest in nature, to put it at the heart of their strategy, what one message would you leave people with, Mathilde, to encourage them to really take nature seriously?
Take nature seriously first.
That's good stuff.
It's an easy one. But basically, there is no longer excuses to say, I will set up a very long-term target and wait. Yep. And see what are the next framework, what are the best things to do. No, you need to act now, act with the tools that you have, with the framework that you have, with the understanding that we have accessible now, because this is what we will need to explain to future generation. We did our best with what we had at that time, so today. So basically, easy way, change now.
Love that.
Act now.
The event organizer will be very happy. So, ladies and gentlemen, please give a really big thank you to Mathilde Mignot for joining us today. Mathilde, thank you so much. Thank you. Thanks so much. So, everyone, I hope you've enjoyed the last hour or so. And next on stage, we're actually going to have a fascinating session on leadership for social impact, where we'll be discussing what it means to lead a business that creates real value for society. And all just a quick top tip that I don't want you to tell everyone because there's only 100 seats over there, but tonight at 5 p.m., I'm going to be on the Crystal Bubble stage launching the Green Shouting Guide, which is a practical tip to help organizations to stop the silence on sustainability. I'm going to be there along B Lab Global, who run the B Corp standard, and Creators for Climate. So do come along at 5 p.m. on the Crystal Bubble stage. Thank you so much. You've been a fantastic audience, and look forward to seeing you soon.